centres, regional facilities and outdoor swimming pools. My experience ranges from working as a lifeguard and duty manager to leading teams of over 100 staff members across multiple facilities, from Casey to Gippsland to Maroondah. I've managed pools of all shapes and sizes, so your water slides, lazy rivers, dive pools, inflatables, zorb balls, surf machines, you name it, I've most likely had something to do with its implementation. I have a diploma of leadership and management, a business degree specialising in tourism management, and I'm currently studying a Masters of Business. I'm passionate about social impact, professional development and compliance, and it's been great working with LSV as I'm able to combine all three of these elements. Before we go into any finer detail of what you should expect in this presentation, I'd like to start with a quote by the Australian Institute of Disaster Resilience. So the economic costs of emergencies in Australia over the past decade averages $18.2 billion per year, and the real cost in terms of human suffering and environmental damage is larger. A key to minimising the cost and effects of emergencies after all reasonable risk reduction measures have been taken is effective emergency planning. For anyone that has been involved in an emergency or a critical incident, you know that these things can sometimes suddenly become very chaotic and disastrous. Today, I'll specifically be discussing emergency planning requirements, emergency planning committee responsibilities, and emergency management plans. So where does LSV fit into all of this? So through analysis of the status sector, there's evidence to suggest that emergency planning is an area that is not completely understood by industry. We complete around 150 facilities pool safety assessments each year, and whilst there's a degree of an on-paper compliance, emergency management plans and checklists, there's a low level of practical application experience. We've noted that the majority of facilities opt to perform an annual evacuation drill, and what this means is that not all staff are tested for competency. There needs to be a deeper level of training and finer details to ensure all staff members are comfortable and competent. You think of the likes of your summer recruitment. You've got a new duty manager, you've got a lifeguard, you have a power outage, or you have a major emergency. You really want to make sure that those staff members are set up for success. So the status sector, water safety strategy, and code of practice, they all hold key information and have distinct goals in relation to raising the profile of industry, highlighting challenges and solutions, reducing drowning, strengthening the aquatic industry, and making compliance easier to understand. I'll exhibit examples and elements of what is required and what is governed by the framework, such as the Australian Standard 3745, Planning for Emergencies in Facilities, the Guidelines for Safe Pool Operations, and the OHS Act 2004. We need to remember with the OHS Act that it requires all employers to provide and maintain a workplace that's safe and without risks to health. And there's also a requirement to provide information, instruction, and training to employees to ensure they remain safe in their workplace. So effective emergency planning assists employees to meet this requirement. Interpretations of the term emergency vary depending on a person's background and experience. As per the Australian Standard, an emergency is described as any event, internal or external, which may adversely affect persons and which requires an immediate response. The GSBO states an emergency is an event, whether occurring in an aquatic facility or originating outside an aquatic facility, that causes or threatens to cause the death of or injury or damage to the health of any person, the destruction of or damage to any property, a disruption to services usually enjoyed by the community, and harm to the environment or to flora or fauna. Emergencies do happen in our aquatic facilities, and these are some real-life Victorian examples of events that have occurred in the past 5 years. And unfortunately, I have been involved in one of these incidents. And it goes without saying that we need to understand how to plan for these emergencies. Emergency planning seeks to minimise the effect of an incident, and it requires the timely application of defined procedures by people with adequate training and resources. For this to occur, plans and procedures specific to relevant activities at your aquatic facility must be developed, documented, and tested prior to the occurrence of an event. An emergency management plan, when used in conjunction with training and evacuation exercises, provides guidance to staff on how to respond in a variety of emergencies. It also contains critical information that will be helpful after the initial emergency response. So emergency planning committees. The EPC should consist of the owner, operator of the facility staff, a qualified or experienced person, facility patrons, and a disabled patron. Initial training of the EPC should address developing and maintaining an emergency plan, duties of all staff when responding to an emergency, emergency identification and analysis, establishing and managing an emergency control organisation, management of documentation, management of assessment activities, developing and implementation of training activities, liaison with emergency services, and post-evacuation management. A common question that I've been asked over the years is, where do I begin? So developing an EMP can be a monster task. So I'd recommend dividing your concept into these different stages. So we have prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. For prevention, consider fire safety audits and fire awareness, having good housekeeping practices, ensuring electrical checks are done, ensuring your facilities are smoke-free, the doors are free from obstruction, patron behaviours are monitored and managed, and combustibles are stored safely. For preparedness, consider how you prepare your emergency plan, how you maintain your emergency equipment, the establishment of an emergency control organisation, the identification of suitable assembly areas, and conducting emergency training and emergency exercises. For response, consider how you remove persons in immediate danger. Who will alert the emergency services and all persons in the facility? How will the event be contained, and how will the facility be evacuated? For recovery, consider organising counselling through an EAP service, debriefing ECO members and other staff. How will you notify senior executives? And how will the review of the effectiveness of response procedures take place? Here I've included a guide for developing EMP to assist you with capturing all the required information. Quite a bit there. So if you have a smartphone, or if you feel the need to take a screenshot, please do so. But just ensuring that you have a clear statement of purpose and scope. You have information of the purpose of the EPC in the plan. You can identify the facility's features, the fire safety equipment, the organisational arrangements. So that's from lifeguard to DM to CEO. The emergency identification outcomes, emergency response procedures, an evacuation diagram, what those training arrangements will look like, how the plan will be distributed to key stakeholders, a record of distribution, the hours of occupancy, a nominated validity period, and the date of issue and any amendment dates on each page of the plan. An emergency control organisation, also known as an ECO, is defined as a person or persons appointed by the EPC to direct and control the implementation of the facility's emergency response procedures. All members of the ECO will have their own roles and responsibilities in relation to pre-emergency, emergency, and post-emergency situation, and these should be displayed in your EMP. Your ECO should be identified through the supply and use of helmets, hats, caps, and/or vests, and just looking at the difference between large and complex facilities to small facilities. So in a large facility, you've got a number of staff members on duty at the time, so you're able to have a chief warden, deputy chief warden, communications officers, area wardens, and first aid officers. Whereas it could differ to your smaller facilities, your country facilities, where the most senior staff member on duty will lead the charge in the event of an emergency. Training should be delivered by a competent person. A competent person is someone who has acquired through training, education, qualification, experience, or a combination of these, the knowledge and skill enabling him or her to correctly perform the required task. During an emergency, the appropriate response is only achieved if all members of the ECO and other people in your aquatic facility know what is expected of them. A program of education, training, and evacuation exercises should be scheduled to test the organisation, the procedures, and the responses to emergency situations. All potential ECO members should be trained to develop the skills and competencies necessary to undertake the duties set out in the procedures of your EMP. There should also be enough personnel trained in all positions within the ECO to allow for varying levels of activity. So consider types of events, staff absences and rostering issues. So you'd really want to make sure team members are able to step up in the event a duty manager goes down or whatever the case may be. Periodic retraining should be conducted following any revision of the emergency procedures, and this should be documented in the emergency management plan. And I also want you to consider what your warden training looks like, your evacuation exercises, and how this information is reflected in the employee induction process. All ECO staff should have a base level competency, while chief wardens should be receiving an intensive training which covers all practical scenarios. This will give them a higher level of competency. So what should happen after an emergency? Post-event debriefing is an essential aspect of both the emergency planning process and successful recovery for an aquatic facility. Incidents occur on an infrequent basis, and it is important to document any lessons identified from managing incidents. The facility should then consider if there is a need to change current policies, procedures, or plans. And if change is necessary, this should be a reason to look at what your the lessons learnt are. It's important that any investigation occurs as soon as possible. The less time between an incident and investigation, the more accurate the information that can be attained is. When incidents involving injury or illness occur, early investigation is essential. The main aim of investigating incidents is to prevent similar incidents recurring, to identify new hazards, and to identify and choose suitable controls. So LSV plans to assist in this space. We're launching an emergency planning service in preparation for summer. This will be low cost and give access to an EMP template, which has been developed from the ground up. We've reviewed the Australian standard and the GSPO, and it incorporates literature reviews of our partner organisations in Emergency Management Victoria, as well as leveraging the many resources that the DHS have provided in this space over the years. Additionally, EPC training and additional training resources have been developed and will be released as part of this service. To summarise and to look at some key takeaways, so based off this data sector report, we know that this is an area where most facilities need some assistance with understanding what the emergency planning requirements are. The EPC should have access to appropriate skills and resources to ensure that the committee is able to competently fulfil its function. ECO training should include drills, exercises, and appropriate assessments. The emergency plan should include all stages of responding to an emergency, pre, during, and post an event, as well as the training requirements. An appropriate training and skills retention program should be developed for the EPC, ECO, and all other employees. We'll open up the floor now to see if you have any questions that you may have. Please feel free to comment in the chat function. Sheila, what are you doing?
Sorry.
No, you're right. Just bear with me as I load up my chat. All right, who do we have here? So RJ is written, what do you mean by ensuring competency for the chief wardens? What should facilities be looking to do in this space? So you should really, as I mentioned in the presentation, you should really be looking at the training of these staff members and ensuring that they're equipped with the skills to perform the duty of the chief warden. So again, looking at the training regime, looking at planning, current recurring skills training, and that induction process as well. We've still got a few minutes, guys. So if you don't mind, I might select some names at random, and there's a few familiar names I see, and I guess I just want to see if there's any assistance that you may need directly from us, and I guess some of your key takeaways. So David Bridson, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, we're going quite well, thanks, mate. We've actually just engaged an external provider to work through our emergency evacuation plans through the whole of council. Okay. So we're kind of just caught up in them at the moment with the discussion about all the little things that they seem to miss based on what we require as leisure centres, basis what an admin office just requires.
Yeah, for sure. So just ensuring all that aquatic stuff is captured, right? Yeah,
that's right. So look, I'm fairly confident that we'll get there, but we probably will reach out shortly. I think we've got to still arrange for our LSV audit for last year or next year, either way. So we'll probably reach out before then just to get some help, make sure that it's all tidied up, neat and tidy.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Nathan Salins, you're at La Trobe now, I hear.
Yeah, correct, mate. Yep.
How's it all going there? How's your emergency management stuff going on?
Yeah, good. So we're pretty fortunate that our OHS team do handle a lot of that sort of stuff for us, which is good. It's probably needs to be a little bit more conversation between the two parties, just about some specific facility stuff that we probably need to get through to them, just to update it all. So yeah, perfect time to do it at the moment. So yeah.
Fantastic. Did you have any other questions? Luke De Pasquale, how's things at Monash?
Yeah, good. It's actually good timing. We've very recently engaged with an external company to review all of our documents and give us some advice. So yeah, fantastic timing.
Yep, good stuff, mate. Karen Mitchell-Shire, how are you doing? Karen Crombie?
Hi guys, yeah, doing well. Thank you.
That's the way. How are the facilities looking in terms of their emergency management stuff?
We've also got council that have at the risk and OH level, but yeah, definitely we'll have to add a leisure aspect to it.
Yeah, absolutely. RJ just asked, who are the external companies? Will be good to hear feedback after the process. Luke De Pasquale.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you guys some feedback once we get a little bit deeper with the company.
Yep, all good. Mickey Lacey at Maroondah.
Hey Adrian. Yeah, we're doing pretty well. We redid our EVAC plan, or did it last lockdown, and then in the induction we did all our EVAC training for all the staff prior to opening for a couple of weeks, and then well, as well.
Yep.
Yeah, just with us.
No, all good. You're a bit hard to hear there, Mickey. Just give me a sec. Yeah, just had to mute. Sorry, I missed most of that.
Oh, is that better now?
Yeah, all good now, yep.
Yeah, sorry. I I was just saying we reviewed our emergency plan in the last lockdown and rolled out a whole bunch of new training for all departments prior to opening for a couple of weeks, and then obviously we've closed again, so it'll give us another opportunity to, I guess, review it again and then engage with with you guys to, I guess, review it and make sure we're covering off everything.
Yep. Fantastic. We have a question from Miriam. How do others go about getting their communities involved? We seem to have resistance. Miriam, if you don't mind turning your mic on and just giving a bit more context with that.
Yeah, hi Paino, how you going?
Yeah, good, thanks.
So I'm down at Warragul Leisure Centre. We've tried it a few times. I've tried to engage like Urella and Scope and some of the groups that use our warm water facility here. But they're always like, oh, we haven't got time, or yeah, let us know when it's on, and then we sort of let them know and they're like, oh no, we can't attend that one, and things like that. So we always end up in a roundabout circle where they never actually attend our meetings. And I ask them questions and I'll give them a feedback sheet and I sort of get half answers back. So I was wondering what other people do to engage their communities to try and get some feedback.
Yeah. So is a formal sit down arranged? I'd probably consider looking at that. But you know, these meetings, these evacuations that you're conducting, they should really be really done at an ad hoc time. So you'd put a sign up at your front desk and you'd say, FYI, everybody, we'll be doing an evacuation between these dates, and you wouldn't really give them a time. So it might be a bit difficult, you know, with the users and getting them out of the warm water pool. But in the event of a real life situation, you're gonna have some difficulties. So it's best to really action it, which I'm sure you're aware. Yeah, I'd say, you know, having dealt with community groups in Gippsland myself, just see if you can schedule quarterly catch-ups and really try and build that relationship, earn their trust, and go from there.
Thank you.
Hope that helps. We've got a couple more minutes, guys, before we transition to swimming and water safety education. If you do have any questions or the like, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. Luke, you've just commented, Aqua Arena are really good at engaging the community to be involved in the EPC. I know Bobby's done some great work getting them all engaged if you're after any advice. So yeah, might be worthwhile touching base with Aqua Arena in Doncaster, Mim, if you're after some advice there. Excellent. All right. Well, I might hand over to the swimming and water safety team. Hey, Caitlin, over to you. You're on mute. Yep, you're good.
Just realised that. Thank you, Adrian. Well, thank you very much for starting us off this morning with such a fantastic and engaging presentation there. Some really important things to take note of, and hopefully even more going forward with these sessions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I'll just get my screen up and ready. Can I just confirm that you can see that screen there?
Yep, that's all good.
Fantastic. Okay, so good morning, everyone. We are starting off a little bit earlier this morning. I'll just run you through our introduction, our housekeeping, and a few things like that. We'll wait a few more minutes for some more people to join before we get into the important stuff, because we know that some people might be joining us at 10:30, so we'll give them a chance to join in from there. So good morning to everyone, and welcome to the Swimming and Water Safety Education stream of the Aquatic Fitness and Recreation Industry Professional Development Series. quite a mouthful there. We are very excited to be back up with the AFAR series, and we're really looking forward to sharing even more information with you all. We're very glad that we've got so many familiar names joining us again for this series, and we look forward to seeing you all for the future sessions as well. I'd just like to take a moment as well to say that if you are interested in presenting for us in one of our sessions, or if you have any ideas for particular topics that you would like covered, that you would like heard, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us. We will put our contact details at the end of this presentation. So all ideas are welcome, and we would love to hear what you guys really want to get out of this. I'll also brush over some of our previous webinars that you may have attended or you may have viewed on the website, as they are all recorded. We started off our last series with some of our dry resources, as we knew that we were starting to go into remote learning. We wanted to provide some free resources that were available to schools and swim schools to share with students and families and members and anyone they could think of, so that we can keep everybody engaged in swimming and water safety. So that's a great one to view. Since then, we've added even more things to our toolkit, all still completely free and accessible for everyone to use. So we can run through that a little bit later on as well. But definitely check it out. And if there are any more resources as well that you think would be very beneficial for you and your centre or your school, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us as well. We'd love to provide things that you guys want and you guys can use. So we're more than happy to keep working on those, keep building on new fantastic resources that can help educate our students in swimming and water safety. So obviously this session here, we are focusing on school swimming and water safety in 2020. So obviously at the moment, school swimming lessons have been paused. They aren't running at this present time. But a big focus for us at the moment is to enable all primary school students to meet some of the requirements of the Victorian curriculum in regards to swimming and water safety. So even though they may not be able to access their swimming program or swimming lessons at this time, we still want them to be learning some water safety skills, educating them about all sorts of things, water safety, so that they're prepared for the summer ahead. We really want our students and our children to be ready to access beaches, inland waterways and pools in a safe way, with all the knowledge that they can develop between now and then. So that's still a really big focus for us here at LSV, and I'm sure it will be a big focus for all of you as well. So in saying that, it's very, very important for us to understand what the Victorian curriculum involves in regards to swimming and water safety. So today we will be joined by Dr. Rachael Whittle from the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, who will be explaining all about how swimming and water safety fits in the Victorian curriculum and many different ideas for how we can meet the curriculum requirements. We'll then go into some ideas for how you can teach some dry swimming and water safety activities, whether you're from a school or a swim school, different ways that you can engage students and children to enable them to learn those water safety skills. Okay, so just to start us off again, for those who may have just joined us, I'm just going through a few housekeeping things. Please do keep your microphones muted at all times. You will notice that you have been muted already, so make sure that that stays that way. Also, please keep your cameras off as well. As this webinar will be recorded, we do ask that you keep your cameras off. Again, this has been done for you already, and also just make sure it stays off to ensure that the full content can be streamed clearly and easily that way too. If you have any questions at any time, please do write them in the chat. As soon as they appear in your mind, pop them in the chat and we can address them when suitable, whether that's throughout the presentation or towards the end. And as I've already stated as well, this webinar will be recorded. So if you would like to revisit this webinar or even share this with your staff members as well, you will be able to access this on the AFAR webpage, which we will put a link to in the chat now at any time. So it should be out possibly towards the end of this week, but you'll be able to find it there. And that's also where you'll find all of our previous webinars. They are all archived on that webpage, so you can have a look through those as well. So our presenters for today, of course, we have Dr. Rachael Whittle, who is the Curriculum Manager for Health and Physical Education at the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, or more widely known as the VCAA, 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 however you wish to pronounce it. You'll also find myself and the rest of our swimming and water safety team in the chat, who will be looking through all of your questions and addressing some things later on in the session as well. So to introduce Rachael Whittle, Rachael brings extensive teaching experience in both secondary and tertiary settings to the curriculum manager role. She has experience in the development of health and physical education curriculum, pedagogy and assessment, and has taught into the pre-service health and physical education teacher education programs. Rachael has been involved in BCE physical education curriculum design and assessment, and has authored a number of textbooks for both 7 to 10 HPE and BCE physical education. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Rachael Whittle to the webinar stage. And Rachael, if you could share your screen, pop on your microphone, and if you'd like to share your camera, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good morning, everybody. I hope at the moment you should be seeing my screen and that you can hear me and see me, fingers crossed. Please let Caitlin know if you've got any issues. So thank you again for having me this morning. And as Caitlin said, today I'm going to take you through where swimming and water safety fits in the Victorian curriculum and what that means in 2020 with continuity of learning for students and flexible and remote learning, and how we can use the resources that have already been developed to perhaps support schools in their hopefully their ongoing teaching and learning programs for their students. So I suppose some background information first in terms of where it actually sits in the curriculum. I am just going to hopefully, there we go. I'm having a slight, bear with me because my screen is not changing.
Hi, Rachael. I think it's still being shared by me, so I'll stop sharing, and if you would like to share your screen. Otherwise, okay. I've got all of your slides saved as a backup, so if you'd prefer me to present for you while you talk to them, we can do that as well.
That's fine, Caitlin, we can do that, and that way, if you can just do the slide change for me then, because I don't have access to that. Thank you. Excellent. All right. So swimming and water safety and where it fits in the Victorian curriculum. So the Victorian curriculum for health and physical education has a number of what we call focus areas, and where swimming and water safety fits is in a couple of those. So it definitely fits in our fundamental movement skills focused area, which means that when we're looking at the actual skills that students are developing, whether it be flotation, whether it be buoyancy, I should say, whether it's propulsion through the water, that fits within our fundamental movement skills focus area. The other area where swimming and water safety fits quite nicely is with our safety. So while students may look at safety in terms of road safety or bike ed safety, we certainly have a large focus on swimming and water safety. Now, both of those focus areas are delivered in our from foundation level, so from what is commonly known as prep, right through. Safety goes right through to level 10. Fundamental movement skills go through to level 4. And then as students get a little bit older, lifelong physical activities include obviously swimming and recreational activities that involve aquatic environments, and also challenge and adventure activities also include many activities which occur in aquatic environments. So there's a very large focus on swimming and water safety throughout the Victorian curriculum. Caitlin, next slide, please. So when you have a look, if you would like to have a look at the Victorian curriculum, you'll be able to identify where swimming and water safety actually occur. Now, most of the water safety content occurs in the personal, social and community health strand of the curriculum. And what you can see on the screen is aspects of the curriculum where you'll see water safety right from foundation through to level 10. So students are expected to have an understanding of safety for themselves, for others and their community right across the curriculum. Then when we look specifically at the development of skills, such as obviously swimming skills, but also other skills involved in water safety and aquatic activities, they fall under the movement strand. So in the next slide that Caitlin will show you, you'll be able to see where students are able to develop those skills going across the curriculum. Now, one of the things to notice is that you'll see in the curriculum, it doesn't talk about the development of, for example, freestyle or flotation or doing an actual rescue. So those things are not specifically mentioned in the curriculum. It talks very broadly about students developing skills within different settings, including aquatic settings. So sometimes it's very broad. The curriculum is very, very broad, and it's hard to identify what it is students actually have to know. So a little bit later in the presentation, I will talk to you about those specifics. But what I wanted to highlight, particularly in 2020, and Caitlin, next slide, please, is the notion that the Victorian curriculum is a learning continuum. So yes, it is set out in 11 different levels from foundation through to level 10, but it's a developmental progression. So what we are expecting is that students will continue to develop their skills as they go through their years of schooling. But in Victoria, we don't associate the levels of the curriculum with a year level at school. So you may have students, and I think actually swim schools do this really, really well, is they're able to provide a program which is not just age appropriate, but developmentally appropriate in terms of the student's skills. So the reason that I wanted to highlight this is the fact that it doesn't matter if you've got years 3 and 4 coming to your swim school to do their program, and you've got students who are only working at foundation level. That's actually perfectly normal, and that's okay. All we want to look for is that progression of student learning. That also means that if you've got the elite swimmer who's coming to swim to your swimming program and they're in, year 6 at school, that doesn't mean we just stop because they've achieved what they need to achieve for level 6. It means that we need to think about how we can progress that student further. So yes, they might be an elite swimmer, but what are their water safety? What's their water safety knowledge like? What are their rescue skills like? Can they identify dangerous situations and strategies to actually avoid those situations? So the Victorian curriculum is a learning continuum, as I said. Where is the student starting? So what is their starting or entry point? And how can we, as educators, progress them along that continuum? So one of the things about 2020 is that if swimming programs don't resume in term 4, and let's be honest, we're not going to be able to get every student back into a swimming pool because the demand will be too high to run those programs, even if we are back with face-to-face learning. One of the things that means is that when you have schools come to you in 2021 and say, how are we going to catch these students up, or how are we going to ensure that students meet the curriculum requirements for swimming, it's okay for you to say, we will still assess the students, determine where they are at, and continue to build on that level of knowledge. And essentially what we hope to see is progression for every student. Regardless of where they start, we're looking for progression for every student. Thanks, Caitlin. Next slide. All right, so one of the things that I thought I'd show you is that notion of increasing complexity. So both in the water safety and swimming skills section, you'll notice that as students go, as students progress, you'll see an increasing complexity in what they have to do. So it's quite reasonable to expect students to, at foundation level, they should be able to identify actions that keep them safe. So when we're talking about being around a pool or around an aquatic environment, they should simply be able to identify actions that keep them safe. Now, some of those actions could be putting a hat on or some sunscreen on, because that will keep them safe, but they can also be very specific. So they're swimming, or they're making sure they're not going into the water without an adult, and they're making sure that, they might talk about pool fences, and identifying those actions is fine. However, by the time that we get students moving towards level 5, 6, we want them to actually be able to explain and apply those strategies. So they should be able to think about how they can apply a strategy to keep themselves and others safe and members of their community. So it could be that you're asking them in terms of scenarios, what might happen if they're at a local community pool and they see somebody else in danger, or they see something else that is not going to provide a safe environment for everybody in the community. So you can see that complexity as it changes changes throughout the levels. And the same happens with their movement skills. So while they'll perform a fundamental movement skill at foundation level, by the time they are in level 5, 6, they should be performing specialised movement skills. So that might be that they can actually perform a turn, that they can certainly do a number of different strokes because they would be considered specialised movement skills. So students are combining those movement skills, putting them together, and that way they are not just demonstrating the fundamental movement skill, and they can perform it, they can demonstrate it, they've looked at refining it, and then they're actually moving on to combining those different skills. Next slide, please, Caitlin. So one of the things that I suppose is a bit not daunting, but can be a little bit confusing about the curriculum is that we have these very broad statements that don't actually tell you exactly what students need to do in terms of their swimming program. And then we have the content descriptions, which talk about, you know, what we expect students to be able to demonstrate. And then it really is up to the swim school or the school to consider the activities that will be used to allow students to demonstrate the achievement. So when we're thinking about, again, that performing of fundamental movement skills in aquatic environments, it could be that we're looking at both their locomotor skills, so their swimming skills, their floating, their sculling, but it could also be their object control skills. So then for students, that would be perhaps using an aid or throwing a buoyancy aid to help with a simulated rescue. So the activity bit, which is the pedagogy, so the teaching and learning, is where, as swim school providers, that's where you come in because that's where your expertise is. Next slide, please, Caitlin. So basically what we want students to do in terms of demonstrating achievement is to determine as an educator what they can do, say, make or write. Now, often when we're in a practical situation, it's very much about the doing. But in this current context, where students are not going to be in aquatic environments, we need to think about how we can assess their knowledge, their skills and understanding of the curriculum, and in this case, swimming and water safety, through what they say, make or write. So it's just a different way of getting students to demonstrate achievement. So therefore, it can be that they put together a promotional video or podcast or something that shows that they can demonstrate an understanding of being in a, you know, using strategies to keep them safe within an aquatic environment. They might make a diorama, they might make a model, and of course they can write in terms of, you know, worksheets, or they can, but they can also write a script and then perform it. There's lots of strategies that we can use to allow students to demonstrate achievement in different ways than actually being in the water. To help with that, next slide please, Caitlin. To help with that, the Victorian Curriculum Assessment Authority has mapping documents to demonstrate both what we would consider classroom activities and activities which would actually occur in the water. And those swimming and water safety mapping documents are available on the VCAA website, and they identify different activities which can be used at both the water level and the classroom level. So they're there for you. And the other thing that's relatively new and has, I think, been a really valuable development in terms of resources is the Swimming and Water Safety Progression Model, which aligns the Victorian curriculum to the very newly released National Swimming and Water Safety Framework. Now, these resources are on the LSV website, on the toolkit, and I think somebody popped it into the chat before for the link. I think I saw that. And so therefore, what we have been able to do is to really unpack the swimming skills and the different things that students should be able to do, aligned to the National Swimming and Water Safety Framework and in alignment with the Victorian curriculum. So when you have a look at that document, you'll be able to see exactly the skills that students should have at each of the levels and how that sits within the Victorian curriculum. While this is a resource, these are just resources, so they're not mandated at all, and swim schools can still use their own levels and things like that, but these are an additional resource to help align to the curriculum, because ultimately, when you're an external provider for a school, what the schools have to do is report against the curriculum. So they need to take whatever evidence that you have about a student's performance, about what they can do, say, make or write. They need to take that and align it back to the Victorian curriculum for their reporting measures. So hopefully this document, the Swimming and Water Safety Progression Model, will help swim schools and schools find a common ground for the language that you're using around what students can actually do. Next slide, please, Caitlin. Okay, so this one is showing those classroom and water-based activities, as I said, the VCAA have produced. You'll see it's colour-coded nice and easily. You'll see how it has broken the curriculum into the different content descriptions. It does have teaching and learning activities. Now, once again, just to be really clear, the teaching and learning activities are always up to whoever's delivering the program. So if that's a swim school or if it's within a school environment, they can vary, because we do acknowledge that the expertise that's brought by external providers and also the understanding of the cohort and the context in which you work is really important. So if what works for one may not work for another. So what is working for one group of students in inner city Melbourne may not work for students who are in rural and remote areas. So when you're developing your teaching and learning program, or your swimming program in this case, the activities that you choose obviously will be very specific to the cohort that you are working with and the context in which you work. But this will help you in terms of that notion of activities which can be done to meet curriculum requirements and to allow students their continuation of learning for swimming and water safety while they can't access aquatic environments, and the activities that can be done in the classroom, or in this case, at home. So there's a number of different activities there in terms of what we would consider classroom activities. And as I said, they're colour-coded for you. And then the next one is the next slide, please, Caitlin, is the water safety Swimming and Water Safety Progression Model. So as I said, it is on the LSV website, and what it does is provides a really, really clear alignment of the actual swimming and water safety skills, knowledge and understanding, and how they will align to the Victorian curriculum. So please take the time to have a look at those and see if you can use them within your delivery of your swimming program to allow you to then feed back to the schools the information that they need in terms of providing evidence around student progression and, of course, student achievement. Now, Caitlin, the next slide is just my contact details. And one of the things that I will say is that if you have questions around the curriculum, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help out where I can. The other thing is too that currently the department and the swimming funding that is going through, it's still waiting on a decision in terms of what will happen for 2020. But in terms of, again, swimming programs and the provision of swimming programs for students from 2020 into 2021, the expectation will be that schools will need to make sure that there is some continuity of learning. So while they might be looking at the moment at developing water safety skills through remote learning, when they return to water-based activities and hopefully, providing students with swimming instruction in perhaps 2021, one of the things that we need to be really aware of is the notion too that, and I said this earlier, that even though the curriculum is a continuum, schools have a 2-year band to deliver one band, I was going to say band again, but to deliver the band of the curriculum. So therefore, for example, while swimming and water safety appears in each level, foundation, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, schools actually have 2 years to deliver the content in levels 3 and 4. So therefore, it's not such a disaster, if you like, that we're going to miss a year. All it means is that we need to establish where those students are when they come back, when they're back in the water, establish where they are, and then continue to build on that level. There is a question in the chat about the assessment table, which I assume was the one which maps the classroom and water-based activities, and they are on the VCAA website. If we can't get a link up quickly, I will share it. I will share it a little bit later. So up to you, Caitlin, on whether or not we can get a link up for that. And then, yes, if there's anything further, any questions people have, I'm happy to answer them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rachel. Such an insightful presentation. And I think it's also lifted a weight off many of our shoulders, knowing that there is that 2-year band for the students to achieve what's in the curriculum, and also that there are different ways that we can still teach water safety if we are unable to access a pool. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll get plenty of questions in over the next few moments. While we do wait to see what those questions are that appear in our chat box there, I will open up the Royal Lifesaving Society Australia's website, as we did receive some very exciting news yesterday, and I'm sure many of you are aware that the National Swimming and Water Safety Framework has now been released. I know that we did conduct a webinar in our last series of AFAR with Craig Roberts from the Royal Lifesaving Society Australia, who was able to give us a very detailed run through of that national framework, and we can now very happily announce that it has been launched yesterday. So I will now open up that website now. We can have a quick look at that. Just bear with me. And while we wait for that to be opened, I will encourage you to put any questions that you have into that chat bar there, and we'll see what pops up. Okay, so you should be able to see on my screen now as well that we've got the Royal Lifesaving Australia website up. We will put this link in the chat. I believe it may already have been placed there, but if not, we will put it in there now or again. So this is the website that has been released by Royal Lifesaving Society Australia, and you are able to download the framework from this website as well. So we'll have a quick look at this little short video that will give us an overview of the framework again. And this is a really good thing to look at, especially considering that Rachael has shown us the progression model that was put together in collaboration with Lifesaving Victoria and the VCAA to demonstrate the links between the curriculum and the national framework there. So a great one to have a look at. We've got the links to that progression model in the chat as well. And it's all accessible on our toolkit. So anything you want to find that we mention in this webinar can very likely be found on the toolkit. So we'll have that link in the chat as well. So I'll just make sure my sound is on and sit back and enjoy this video.
Royal Lifesaving has undertaken research on children's swimming and water safety skills for over a decade now. This includes school-based programs, vacation programs, and commercial swim skills. The most recent research undertaken by Royal Lifesaving investigated the swimming and water safety skills of children attending commercial swimming outside of school and vacation programs. The aim of this research is to provide a snapshot of what children are currently learning and achieving in these lessons, and how it compares against the National Swimming and Water Safety Framework. The research examined the skills of over 63,000 Australian children aged between 2 and 15 years attending private swimming lessons across Australia. This showed that nearly 3/4 of children appeared to be exiting swimming lessons by the age of 8 years old. And what we also found out, at this age, many of the children were not able to swim 10 metres of freestyle or backstroke. On average, children are aged between 9 and 10 years old by the time they could achieve the national benchmark skills of 50 metres freestyle, 25 metres survival backstroke, and treading water for 2 minutes. What this really showed as well is that swim schools were predominantly teaching freestyle and backstroke and didn't have as much focus on water safety skills, such as survival strokes, rescue techniques, treading water, and those types of skills. Of those that were teaching water safety skills and survival skills, they were normally taught at the more advanced levels, where children were unlikely to be staying in swimming lessons. Remember, we found out that children were exiting by about 8 years old, so they were unlikely to be learning those really key skills. A
as an organisation, we've been swimming since the beginning. We want kids to swim, we want adults to swim, and the notion that many of our primary school children leave school not being able to swim even basic measurements, 25 metres, 50 metres, and this is horrendous. Of course, from a Royal Lifesaving perspective, we're worried about that from a water safety impact in later years, but the central aim of the National Swimming and Water Safety Framework is to give everyone a little bit more guidance on what makes a good swimming and water safety program. We've revitalised the Swimming and Water Safety Framework for a range of very simple reasons. We thought it was important in the current context to give program managers, schools, education systems, government instructors a good understanding of what makes a good swimming and water safety program.
Okay, so there you can see the National Swimming and Water Safety Framework that's just been released. Now, knowing that we are getting very close to our finishing time, we will quickly go over a couple of questions that we've had, and then we'll go over some last little bits of information. Now, I did notice one question in the chat was asking about, I'll see if I can find it, Carolyn. Thank you for your question, Carolyn. Is there something specific coming up for special needs students? In terms of that, I'm definitely going to say watch this space. We are still, we're going to release some further information about swimming and water safety for special needs students. Things are in the works, and I'm sure we'll have more information for you shortly. Rachael, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to pop in the chat, Carolyn, but much easier just to tell you, the Victorian curriculum actually has a curriculum for special kids with additional learning needs. So that's our A to D curriculum. So it is on our website, and it does include particularly safety, but also swimming, well, some skills associated with being in aquatic environments. So even though we often focus on F to 6 with the swimming program for students in primary years, we do have a curriculum which includes, again, water safety and swimming skills for students with additional needs. And it's the A to D curriculum, which is also available on our website. So when you go to the curriculum, just have a look below foundation level and all of the information of the expectation for students and what they can do. Once again, it's not age specific. It's about the level the students enter at.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachael. So just skipping through our last few slides, we did have quite a funny clip to watch, but we might save that for next time. So make sure you join our next webinar. You will be able to see this quite entertaining clip. Going forward, we would encourage you to, and I'll just turn off my sound there, I can hear that it's echoing. We would encourage you to think about the different ways that you could teach water safety without a pool. So the different dry options that you have, swim schools and schools, we encourage you to communicate with each other to see how you can best support the students to develop their water safety knowledge. So there might be options and possibilities for you to have a live session with the swim school to share information with the students, whether they are completing remote learning still, or if perhaps they are going back to school, you could present a little water safety presentation for the students to teach them all the water safety knowledge, or most of the water safety knowledge that they would tend to learn in their Learn to Swim lessons. So definitely see the different ways that you could support schools and schools can support swim schools, and ultimately achieving that goal of educating our students and our children about water safety in preparation for summer. I think that's the most important thing we can do at the moment. Finally, stay tuned for some things that we have got coming up. We've got some competitions, our future webinar topics. As I said, please do get in contact with us if you would like to deliver a webinar, or if you have any topics of interest that you would like to see, and have a look at our previous webinars on our website as well. Finally, get in contact with us at schoolswimming@lsv.com.au, or call that number on screen. We can put that in the chat as well as we go. Another little video that we might save for next time as well, so make sure you tune in. And finally, I would like to introduce Sheila, who will be facilitating our next session, which is all about leadership. And she will be joined by Dr. Rob O'Brien from ANZCA, who will be talking all about culture and behaviour, 10 to 1 in creating good culture. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. And Sheila, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Caitlin and Rachel, and the whole education team behind the scenes. It was such a fantastic and informative session. You always bring so much in the swimming and water safety and education space. Hello, everybody. Now, for those that have just joined us, I am Sheila, and I am facilitating the leadership AFAR session for today. Before I pass over to Rob, I have just popped a reminder of housekeeping in the chat line for you. So if you are able to, please keep your microphones muted and your cameras off for this presentation. That would be much appreciated. Of course, we encourage you to ask lots of questions. If you do have any questions or comments for Rob along the way, please pop them in the chat line. He is here for only a short moment. And just as a reminder, this session is being recorded. And if you have any questions or concerns about that, please make contact with the team. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce Rob to share his screen and turn his camera on when he has a moment. While he's doing that, Rob is the Executive Director of Education and Research at the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists. Rob has over 20 years experience in a range of education environments, including previous learning and development specialist at LSV. His major research and development interests are in improving outcomes in health through the use of non-technical skills training and in clinical debriefing grounded in simulation-based education. Rob holds both doctoral and master's degrees in education, focusing on adult learning in the context of ongoing professional learning for educators. Please help me welcome Dr. Rob O'Brien. And if you are there, Rob, turn your mic on.
I'm here.
I can hear you
I am
now,
here.
yeah.
I'm just having trouble with trying to share my screen at the minute, but we'll hopefully, can you see my screen now, Sheila?
Yeah, I can. I can see your
Excellent.
desktop. Yep, perfect.
And you can see it's unfortunately there's just a slight lag in it. So hopefully you can see the talk up on the screen now.
Yeah, ready to go.
And
Thanks, Rob.
excellent. So thanks for having me. I was fortunate enough to catch the very end of that and see it was a really interesting area, and one which I think that having spent a bit of time in LSV is an excessively important area and topic to continue to develop and understand, and probably even more so in the current situation we find ourselves in Victoria, with many a child who doesn't have necessarily access to swimming. What I'm going to speak about now over the next 20 minutes or so is around culture. So I've spent a fair bit of time with an obsession, I suppose, around behaviour. I have a behavioural psychology background and an education background, and although as well as being involved in work with LSV, I'm the current exec director at the College of Anaesthetists, in which we oversee the education, training and research across Australia and New Zealand. And it's been an interesting time over the last 5 months to see the impact of a pandemic on people's responses to issues, and trying to assist people and to continue to develop a really positive attitude towards things, which over an extended period of time, as you could well imagine, is not necessarily always the easiest thing to do. But what we're going to look at is the 10-to-1 tips, I suppose, on some of the things we need to consider in how you could develop your culture, look towards a successful culture, and whether that be a swim school, a leisure centre, a surf club, or any other organisation that you might be involved in, the core fundamental principles are the same. So when we're talking about culture, we're thinking about the types of behaviours, how we communicate, the values, the beliefs, and people's interpretation of an experience. So everyone will interpret something differently. We've all been to various meetings and or activities where someone's walked away thinking it was fantastic. Other people are a little bit disappointed by what's occurred, whether that be the quality of the information that have been provided or the behaviours of people who are there. And often that is a reflection of someone's understanding of the culture of an organisation. So we know that we put up strategies, visions. We put together mission statements, strategic plans, and we put them on websites and we talk to them and we try and enact them. What we know our culture is, it's the, how we actually put in place those sorts of things, and it's the customs, the rituals, the urban myths that are around and what they look like. And every organisation, every club or team has their own sort of variation and culture that's been developed, and that's often the hidden thing. People will talk about how it's difficult to potentially define culture, but for whatever reason, we know when it's not going well. And that's a really interesting thing to consider, how we work on that. So we do know that when things go wrong in any organisation, it's usually because one or more of the culture levers have been pulled and there's things going wrong with that organisation. So sometimes it's the vision or values that we have. Often it's based around the communication that is or isn't happening and how that happens, who it comes from, the tone of which it may have been perceived by someone, and the attached behaviours that occur with it. It's also the leadership that people will exhibit or will not exhibit it, and the type of leaders that people or the organisation will look at. And some of these sorts of levers that we know can be pulled and will often cause organisations to either be undermined or create a really poor culture, become part of the tips of what we're going to look at over the next little while. So my number 10 tip is that you need to be really clear about your values, your vision and your mission. So it's great to create documents. It's fantastic to bring in consultants to help you develop and design strategic plans, but you need to be able to live those and see some achievements. So, if you've got a mission and we all should have visions, missions, values that underpin what we're doing. We have to live them. We have to see them. We have to be assessed against the process and progress against those strategic visions and missions, so we can actually know where we're going. So, and it's really important to have those visible. Football clubs, I've had a bit to do with football and sporting organisations in the past. Football clubs are fantastic at putting up their values and their expected behaviours all over the walls of their football club. Even at the worst of times, they're still referred back to. And I did a bit of work with Essendon in 2016, the year that we had the majority of the club on what I like to joke around and say was sabbatical leave. But they had their values and their behaviours and their expectations up on the wall in various meeting rooms, and they would refer back to them. And it's really important that a swim club, a football club, a surf club, a swim school, a leisure centre has a set of values, has a mission and a vision, and they articulate that and put it up so that people who are coming into the organisation can see it printed up on the wall. And it can be, I would recommend not putting it up in a small little 1 A4 sheet up somewhere. I mean, paint the words up on the walls in places so you can all see it, and that makes it really clear for people. Number 9, know your role, play your role. It's really big in elite sport, and it really is fundamental to any organisation that people understand what their role is, and that they don't just understand it, but they'll actually do it. So in any sporting organisation or any sporting team, especially, we allocate people various roles to play, and that role will change from week to week. So depending on your position you would normally play, the skill set you have, the competency level you have in a skill set for that skill set will depend on what your role will be, and your ability to play that role and play your part as part of a team or a wider organisation will often influence the success and or failure of the culture and the success and or failure of that particular organisation that you're working with. And it's often really important to acknowledge with people that although they come in with an expectation of playing a particular role, their role may change depending on the situation that has arisen. And perhaps now in the current environment we find ourselves working in and living in, the adaptability and ability to understand that we can't do what we normally would do, and we need to adapt as quick as we can, knowing that not everything will be perfect, but play our role, whether it be in our home life or our work life, is really important to understand the culture of which we're developing. Number 8, we like to say that you should recruit, mentor and develop talent. A little disclosure, my son's the one on the right. The boy on the left, I'll call him a boy, although he's an 18-year-old man, is at his surf club. And we got to know him at the beginning of last summer, and they spent a fair bit of time paddling together. And in fact, they've become friends. And he and his other brothers mentor my son. And a club is often, or any organisation really, is strengthened by your ability to identify talent and mentor that. And that's not just necessarily, my son being mentored or developed, but the ability to put time and the skills into the mentor, not just the mentee, and allow them to develop other people, because it highlights their ability and their skills and allows them to then have a greater impact on other people and the culture within that organisation. Really good, successful organisations will assist you with that induction period into a new job. Being able to allocate someone as a mentor for a period to help them understand, knowing that you can ask whatever question you may have, regardless of how silly you may think it is really important. And being able to recruit specific people into your organisation who not just can do the job, but are able to mentor and develop talent within the other people is a really important part of developing the culture within your organisation. The symbols we have. So clubs love to, or organisations love to put up symbols. And the symbols that we have and that we put forward to represent an organisation will often give people on the outside and those still within the organisation an expectation or an understanding of what they expect you're trying to achieve. So I pulled this picture out and I think it's a great example that, for me, the symbol that they've put up here is one of success, and that success is winning gold medals. Not every organisation should have that as their sole purpose. There are people who are at elite level within any organisation, whether it be a sporting team or your work organisation, who will expect to achieve the highest level in every outing that they have, which is perfectly fine. But if your vision and mission is about developing people and creating a culture that is accepting and will integrate all sorts of people regardless of their cultural background, their level of competence or their willingness and ability to win something, then having someone up as a symbol that only demonstrates winning and success in that particular aspect is not necessarily a true reflection of the culture or the values you have. So it's really important to think about who or what you put forward in relation to the symbols that you have. Marketers are really good, especially with schools. When they show pictures of students in schools, they'll have quite a diverse group of kids that are put forward in their imaging, whether it be on the internet or the paper-based things that they send out to families, that will give them the understanding that it's an inclusive environment and that we would expect and accept people from all walks of life. If they just showed the captain of the winning, first 18 footy team, then potentially we're sending a message to a family that is not or shouldn't be necessarily what the culture is within an organisation. So it's really important to consider what the symbols are that you put forward as an organisation in relation to what you want people to take away from, because they may not even have a conversation with you to understand what the culture is, but they'll determine their understanding of your culture based on what image is put forward from a symbols perspective. Recognise someone. It's really important to recognise. Fortunately, my son on the right-hand side of the screen was fortunate enough to win a couple of gold medals this year at the Junior Lifesaving Championships. We hope that we'll get another crack at it next year, depending on how we go in Victoria. But we need to recognise people's successes, and whether it be a gold medal or a ribbon, or being able to compete well and integrate with another team that comes fifth, that's a success. Being able to develop friendships and relationships with other people, that's a recognition of success. Being able to understand that what you recognise could or should be a reflection of your culture, and it could or should be a reflection of the values and the vision of your club. So, recognising someone's ability to undertake the patrol hours that they do, or the swimming teaching that they may do within your aquatic centre. So being able to then builds upon that as a and the recognition. So, if you're the swim teacher of the year, why are you the swim teacher of the year? Is it because you've been able to progress people from level 1 to level 2 in a period of time, or is it because of the feedback you've received from parents to say that the kids love coming to swimming lessons and they really enjoy it, and they're learning and enjoying it, developing a love of the water, and really developing an appreciation of water safety? So you need to work out what it is that you have as your vision and mission, and then recognise those people for that particular aspect. Number 5 is celebrate success. We often will identify that we've been successful, and as quick as we can, we'll move on to next week. We'll move on to the next point here. So it was really interesting when football returned to the AFL and how they changed the way in which they were able to celebrate their success with singing the song. There's been some issues identified in football of late around their ways of celebrating successes and identifying people and potentially, or not potentially, but doing things to people in their celebration that's inappropriate. But as an organisation, you need to identify what you've done well, and you need to celebrate that success and recognise the successes of both individuals and the organisation in achieving what they hope to do. Not everybody will go through a sporting year, a teaching year, a year of work, and necessarily feel that they've been successful. So you need to identify parameters that people may be able to meet and achieve quickly and be considered to be successful, and then identify parameters for things that might take longer, maybe 6 months, 12 months, and be able to measure up against that. And when they are successful, you need to highlight that success, because that builds the culture of the organisation to understand that individuals, teams, and the organisation set out to achieve something. And when we do achieve it, we'll celebrate that success. If we haven't quite achieved it, we need to work out what we need to do to try and achieve those successes for our next year. But it's really important that we don't just meet what we needed to do and then just move on quickly. Give people the opportunity to actually enjoy the success, celebrate the success, and identify what it was that contributed to the success. Number 4 is empowerment. We need to empower. It was interesting when I was looking for pictures of empowerment. I found an enormous amount of images of females that were flexing muscles, and it was all about empowerment of females. And I would readily accept and acknowledge that there's been a significant deficit in being able to integrate or accept and try and promote females into various aspects of what we do. And we need to empower not just our female colleagues who are fantastic and have the abilities to do, but look beyond that, look to people who are younger, people with various cultural backgrounds. So not just look at it from a narrow perspective and think about how we encourage and empower male, female, young, old, culturally diverse, varying abilities, to try and give them and everyone within your organisation the ability to contribute and contribute to the best of their ability, regardless of their background and or gender, and be really conscious of ensuring that we get some balance in life, and that be, and I know that in talks I've given around culture before, I readily talk about the issue I think we have, and this is a personal perspective, around lots of organisations being very old white male dominated, whether it be a surf club or what I do within medicine is very white, grey-haired, male dominated. And we need to be conscious of that, and we need to make sure that we empower people to feel comfortable to be able to do that. And your culture and the success of your culture will depend on how well you empower people. And it's important to acknowledge that you can't just say that you're going to empower people. You need to put mechanisms in place to help people feel comfortable, and they will tell you when they're comfortable. You can't say that you've created a safe environment. They need to feel comfortable to be able to feel that they are empowered to be able to speak up or to undertake a position that they feel that they could or should be doing and it would be of benefit to the organisation. So it's really important to empower people. Now, number 3 is how we communicate. Many of the errors in life we have, whether it be our family and or work life, is based around miscommunication. We think we've communicated something and we completely miss the mark. My wife constantly tells me, for someone who thinks and works in an area that is reliant on communication and teaches people how to communicate, in certain circumstances, I'm terrible at it. And I acknowledge that. We don't always get it right. We have, at the moment, probably an over-reliance on being able to utilise technology to communicate. We can't, for a range of reasons, undertake our normal face-to-face communication. We can't smile at someone as we walk down the street and send a message non-verbally. It's a really difficult thing to do. So the culture of your club, your organisation, whatever it is that you're working within, how we communicate, what mechanisms you look at to communicate your message, whether it be a picture and or words, will dominate how people perceive your organisation or what message they take from that. A number of the people that we work with, and medicine is a great example, the divide between people's age and experience demonstrates a different communication method. Junior doctors will expect that if you send someone a text message, it's because it's an important aspect, an important message you're trying to send to someone. Whereas older people, perhaps like myself, expect that if it's really important, you'll pick up the phone and actually call and we'll speak to each other. So there's a disconnect between what people think is an effective communication. So you need to find out how people want to be communicated with and then make sure you tailor that communication towards their needs and their expectations as well. Clearly set expectations. It's really important for us to make sure that you set your expectations with everybody at the beginning, so there's no misunderstanding as to what you want, how you want it to be done. Give people the opportunity there and along the way to speak up and share their opinions. We'll take that into consideration and work out how you're going to do it. At the beginning of anything, you need to clearly set expectations of you or your organisation with your work colleagues or volunteers, and then make sure that they also are able to articulate their expectations of you. So we need to make sure that it's a two-way street and everyone's clear about what our common goal is. We have what we call a shared mental model, where we're both understanding what our goal is, what we're trying to achieve, and how we're going to achieve that particular goal, and then what we believe would be our expectations and understanding about how we're going to do that. Which leads me to number one, which I think is the most important thing, but often the most difficult thing, is enforce your expectations. If we clearly set our expectations, we must enforce those expectations. One of the biggest issues, and I've been experiencing it of late in my work, is that we work with a range of volunteers in so many of the things that we do now. And people's behaviour at times is not what we would expect of someone who's working within our organisation. So if we clearly set our expectations, whether it be in written and or verbal format, you must make sure that you enforce those expectations. If people are doing things that are outside of those expectations, it's really important from a cultural perspective to enforce those. And David Morrison hits home with a talk he does on YouTube around the Defence Forces in unacceptable behaviour, and we hear it a lot in various aspects. He says the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So if you've set an expectation, you've set a standard, and you see it not being done and you ignore it, then it's much harder to change the next time. And the more often you let something go, or the more frequently you allow people to work around that that expectation, what you do is you actually normalise deviance, and you allow people to stray from the standard. And then when you do decide to bring them back into line, or someone else decides to bring them back into line, it's really difficult to do, because you'll hear they've always been like that. Don't worry about it. That's just the way they behave. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is acceptable, or it should be acceptable, and it becomes more difficult. So I really think that as you set a standard for the development and the culture that you've got within your organisation, you've set your standards, you've clearly articulated them, you must enforce them, but you must also understand that that may not always be so well received by people who either they or their colleagues have been behaving in a certain way for an extended period of time, and being able to recalibrate behaviour can sometimes be difficult, and you have to be prepared to the repercussions for that. And that is when your leadership within your group is a really important thing. How you communicate what you want, you know, the values, the behaviours, And the other 9 points, I suppose, leading up to the enforcement is a really important thing, that you've been able to clearly set out what you want within your organisation. So Sheila, I've given you I promised you I'd do the express version like you asked me. So there's our 10 to 1 tips for developing culture. They all have a place, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. They all will integrate in one way or another with each other. And when you let out one thing and it doesn't quite work, then you'll often find that, you know, there'll be a cascading effect that will impact other parts of the organisation. So I'm happy to stop sharing and hand back to you.
Rob, that was absolutely fantastic. And to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever heard you speak so quickly. I appreciate it. You spoke about culture change. What would be your main number one tip to take away from this if we needed to address older thinking while still respecting everything that person or those people have achieved in the organisation?
Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge the contribution that they've made to the organisation, and that they've played a really important role in getting your organisation to where they are now. But we also we need to articulate that where we're going may be different to where they've been, and we want them to come with us, but this is what we need from them to be able to go and work towards our goal. And there'll be, unfortunately, a percentage of people who won't necessarily want to go that way, and we have to acknowledge that that's okay too. But we need to set our vision and our goal, acknowledge what they've done, and we want them to come with us to get to where we need to go.
Yeah, fantastic. And your number one key learning whilst working through impacts of change, what does that look like for you?
My key learning, and I think it's probably been reinforced, especially this week for me, is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. In any change environment, there's a level of discomfort, regardless of who's driving the change. And if you think it's going to work perfectly well for you, then you're probably a little naive in your expectations, and you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So even for me, overnight, we've had our outbreak in New Zealand, and it won't be limited to four cases. So it's thrown our arrangements for credentialing and examining anaesthetic trainees into absolute disarray overnight. So if we just have to be comfortable that we need to be uncomfortable and move and adapt as we go through things. Yeah,
it's a phrase that we've heard quite a bit, haven't we? And it's just absolutely fantastic to have you online, Rob. You always bring so much to this space, and it's so important right now as we continue to look for every other opportunity to keep developing ourselves and keep ourselves confident. Please help me thank Rob O'Brien for his valuable time today, albeit very short and sharp, but very impactful and dynamic. If anybody does have any lasting questions for Rob around culture, succession planning, please make contact with myself or the team. I also have dropped in Rob's LinkedIn account as well, so please make contact with him there. Also, please take a moment to thank all our other speakers today, Adrian for kicking us off, and then Dr. Rachael Whittle previous to Rob, and of course our partners, particularly in these times. Please be sure to lock in these dates that you can see on the screen right now for next month's AFAR, and keep an eye out on your social media pages, the AFAR webpage, and your respective comms and newsletters. And always reach out to the team if you need any support at any stage. Rob mentioned earlier that around succession planning. And we have, in saying that, our Blue Connection session on the 27th of August, where we have leading teams join us and deliver exactly on that, around succession planning, talent IDing and championing others. So please make sure you log into that one. Watch our webpage, our social media pages as well. And finally, these sessions have been recorded and they will be uploaded onto the AFAR webpage by the end of the week and made available to you. So a great resource to not only reflect back on, but also share with your teams. So as it hits 11:31, apologies for going over 1 minute. Thank you so much for attending today and investing in not only yourself, but also your teams. As always, from us here at Lifesaving Victoria, please take care of yourselves and each other and reach out as you need. See you next time. Bye.